linkages shortly. We'll start in 2 minutes.
Humanity is becoming increasingly urban. More than half the world's people now live in cities and towns. Urban residents depend on rural areas for food, water, energy, and raw materials. At the same time, they generate the bulk of carbon emissions, waste, and pollution on our planet. Urban-rural linkages refer to the flow of people, goods, information, capital, and services that bring communities and cultures together. Rural communities benefit from employment opportunities, financial and technology flows, transport links, power lines, and digital connectivity. Local and regional food systems are a prime example of how these linkages work, connecting rural producers to markets and supply chains that feed our growing cities. While cities and built-up areas cover less than 3% of the global land surface, their consumption footprint extends to virtually every corner of the Earth. Sprawling settlements and infrastructure are displacing some of our most fertile agricultural lands. This puts immense pressure on more remote rural and natural areas to meet increasing demand. We need to rethink our urban-rural relationships if we hope to address the converging land, climate, and biodiversity crises. We all depend on the intricate web of life to meet our daily...
Really sorry about that mishap. We will show it later. I think we have a technical challenge about that. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. We are really excited to have you join us for this community of practice session on biodiversity beyond borders. This session is co-hosted by two vibrant teams of UN Habitat, that is the Urban Rural Linkages team and the Biodiversity team. And thanks to all teams and both teams and all colleagues involved for putting this together. So the two teams continue to navigate two resolutions on these two critical topics adopted by member states at the UN Habitat Assembly in 2019 and 2023, respectively. So we'll be hearing more about this during this session. This platform of the community of practice and online platforms of sharing experiences continues to serve as an important space where we explore and define synergies, fostering collaboration to strengthen efforts at UN Habitat and beyond. So for this session, as we approach the key global events this year, like the 12th session of the World Urban Forum and the upcoming Conference of Parties, commonly known as the CoPs, by the three UN conventions, that is CBD, UNCCD, and UNFCCC, today's session comes at a very crucial moment. We have an outstanding lineup of experts from different countries, and they'll be helping us to explore and deepen our understanding on these very interesting topics and these very interesting agendas of the day. So I'm excited about what we'll be engaging and sharing today and on the insights that will help us refine our approach on these pressing global challenges. My name is Grace Gifiri, and I'll be moderating today's session, assisted by Thomas Forster, session where we will be having discussion. So for our session today, we will share knowledge and experiences on global promotion of biodiversity amidst urbanization. We'll also identify successful tools and strategies for biodiversity conservation across the urban-rural continuum. We'll also share key messages and calls for action, governance models, and investment for managing biodiversity for the upcoming global events such as World Urban Forum and the COPs, as I mentioned earlier. So here's the flow of the session today. We'll start with very brief key opening statements, which will set stage for our session today, followed by a dynamic panel, which will share insights from the field and from different contexts and expertise globally. And then we'll close with a question and answer session and discussion. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go along, even if it's not from what the speakers will have talked about, but within the subject matter. I believe our experts present today are glad to respond to you. Do also post any relevant resources that would be relevant to this audience. Without further ado, let's dive in. We want to save some time for discussion, so please stick to your time in as much as possible. And we're going to start with opening remarks from UN Habitat by Dr. Remy Sechiping, who is the Chief of the Policy, Legislation and Governance section. Remy has over 2 decades of experience in the UN system, academia, public, private sector, in different contexts globally on related matters. He'll be sharing with us UN Habitat work on urban rural linkages and its intersection with biodiversity in the context of urbanization. Over to you, Remy. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks, colleagues, for putting this exciting session together. All partners and participants for joining us. Indeed, it's a great pleasure that the 21st session of PLGS, or Policy Legislation Governance sections of UN Habitat, is held on the very interesting topic of biodiversity beyond borders, fostering life across urban rural landscapes. As was indicated earlier, this is timely dialogue because this is an opportunity not only to share experiences, but also our knowledge on the 2 important topics on urban rural linkages and biodiversity. And because we need to promote harmonious and resilient ecosystem across territories. This session is, as we indicated, co-organized by 2 branches. We did the Global Solutions Division at UN Habitat, the Program Development Branch that oversees our program on biodiversity. But we also have the Urban Rural Linkages team within the Urban Practice Branch that looks at the urban rural linkages. But just to give you a context of why these 2 are relevant, if I start with the urban rural linkages team and the work that we have been doing there, we know that through our investigation and our engagement on this topic, that urban rural landscapes are interdependent. Therefore, it's important that solutions are also territorially relevant. We take cognizance of the resolution of UN Habitat Assembly, the first UN Habitat Assembly resolution on urban rural linkages adopted in 2019 that recognized the need of integrated territorial development approach. Since then, we have been working tirelessly with many stakeholders over many countries to engage and to develop products, capacity, technical assistance, advisory services, partnership to promote and demonstrate how that resolution could be put to practice. Just to give you an idea, we have organized over 15 training events or opportunities in over 7 countries. And we have reached out to over 500 diverse stakeholders just to show you the breadth of urban rural linkages and the diversity of the stakeholders we are dealing with. Through the knowledge, some of you are quite familiar with our compendium of inspiring practices, which has over 60 cases from 58 countries, demonstrating good things, different things that are happening in countries to promote urban rural linkages. We also have newsletters that demonstrate or show and share what we are doing and what other partners are doing in that type of space. We have, in terms of advocacy, many of you are quite familiar with our International Forum on Urban Rural Linkages. We have already had 3 editions since 2018, and the 4th one will be scheduled for next year. So just to give you an idea of why is it important. Now moving on to the biodiversity. Again, the second UN Habitat Assembly adopted the resolution that asked member states and UN Habitat to promote diverse and resilient cities through the lens of urban and territorial planning, because urban territorial planning is also a territorial approach in a way. So it's important, and my colleagues with Christina will elaborate a bit more later on that this engagement will demonstrate what we have been doing in that since that the adoption of the resolution, and the type of tools, instruments, and products and approaches that we have been able to put in place to create that synergy. So now, talking about the synergy, what brings together biodiversity and urban rural linkages, because there is a clear consensus that biodiversity must be promoted, used, nurtured, protected across all territories, and not limited to specific places such as park. So the idea of interdependency, continuum of diversity is very important. So you will hear more about how the approach of biodiversity and UN Habitat is also across territories, across spaces. So it becomes so natural that for us, bringing urban-rural synergy within the ecosystem, we clearly demonstrate through the lens, for instance, of climate change, of habitat loss, and environmental or land degradation, the imminent or the importance of linking these two resolutions together. So further down the line, it's important for us when you look at the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals that they are all complementary. The biodiversity and urban rural linkages that are within the targets and of the SDGs. The last point that is relevant for bringing these two resolutions, at least from the perspective of UN Habitat, is how we can collectively service the conventions. Could be the Convention on Biodiversity, Biological Diversity, for instance, where we have been engaging in some of these CoPs, and colleagues here, some participants here will testify to that. Again, you will know that in the upcoming World Urban Forum, there are discussions and showcasing experiences of these conventions in collaboration with UN Habitat in promoting either biodiversity or urban rural linkages in the context of some of these conventions. Some of you are quite already aware and engaged in the upcoming COP16 in Riyadh, where UN Habitat is fully involved and will facilitate and co-organize a governance day with one particular session focusing on urban rural linkages, and that will be an opportunity for us to release officially one of the joint projects that with UNCCD, and colleagues will talk about that later. The same with the Convention of Party for UNCCC, where colleagues here are working tirelessly towards that. So again, one of the immediate opportunity platform for us to demonstrate that will be beyond this COP, will be the World Urban Forum scheduled from the 4th to the 8th in Cairo, where all of you are, of course, invited, and many of you will be there. And you see, and my colleagues will share through the links here some of the events that we have in the context of urban rural linkages, and you see there are a variety of those. The same could be done for the biodiversity and some of these conventions, that to show that at UN Habitat, we believe that the linking biodiversity and urban rural linkages are natural and should be promoted throughout. So again, thank you very much, and I wish all of us successful discussion and to strengthen the biodiversity across borders, across urban and rural areas. So Grace, back to you, and look forward to the fruitful discussion.
Thank you so much. And I go with your last statement that indeed biodiversity should be promoted and nurtured, not only in urban, but also in rural, in the whole urban-rural continuum. And thank you for sharing with us the very interesting work that UN Habitat has done on urban-rural linkages, the very interesting and insightful statistics, and the work, of course, that is going on biodiversity. And I understand my colleague Christina will be telling us more about this. Thank you so much. We'll be going to the next Mr. Carlos is not able to join us, but he'll join us as we proceed with this session. So we'll be proceeding to Miss Chantal Robichaud, who has over 10 years of experience in this field. She's an Associate Program Management Officer with the Secretariat of Convention of Biological Diversity. As I'm introducing you, Miss Chantal, I'd like to see you, hoping your camera will work well. In her capacity, she supports engaging local and subnational governments to mainstream biodiversity. So we are hoping to hear from you, your reflections on the engagement of cities and territories in global forums such as the upcoming CoPs, as Remy mentioned, as well as the 8th Summit on Biodiversity. And thank you so much for joining us. We know it's very early for you, but you have sacrificed and you're here with us. Ms. Chantal, over to you.
It's a pleasure. Hello. Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here among these honorable guests and colleagues from around the world, from diverse backgrounds and areas of work. It's a pleasure for me to speak about the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the work of the Secretariat, what's coming up with the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in Cali, which will open in a couple of weeks, and that will be preceded by the 5th meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation. Also important for stakeholder engagement and for subnational and local authorities to engage as well, because there will be a lot of discussions around the importance of working across the silos, working basically in the whole of society and whole of government approach, which is a very new topic for us as it was adopted under the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework in December 2022. And these concepts, they make sense, obviously, rationally for all of us. And now it's time for us to experiment what it means to work in a whole of government and whole of society approach. And this is why it's so exciting to be here and for me to learn from all of you. I'm not a technical person. I work in general on cooperation with conventions and UN agencies, and I also work at the Secretariat, specifically at the meetings of the Secretariat and the convention on engaging stakeholders. And in particular, subnational and local authorities. For the time being, as the recruitment for the for the officer on this job is in process, we're very excited that it is coming soon. But we've been able to continue the work, including with UN Habitat and with so many other partners, like ICLE, I think, is present here today, and Regions 4, and many others who are part of the global partnership on cities and local and subnational governments. All this to say that, yes, the Secretariat is really gearing up now for the we call it the 2024 UN Biodiversity Conference in Cali. It's actually a meeting a conference that includes the meeting of the CBD Conference of the Parties, but also the 11th meeting of the parties under the Cartagena Protocol and the 5th meeting of the parties under the Nagoya Protocol. Altogether, it seems like we will host in Cali with the host government more than 16,000 participants, which is a small number for a convention like climate change, but it's a huge number for the Convention on Biological Diversity. It would be a record number, and we're very excited. And Colombia is also gearing up very, very solidly and with a lot of activities locally, nationally, regionally, and beyond. The agenda of the COP is really packed. We are not sure how we're going to go through the agenda in those 2 weeks. But certainly the COP will focus on important issues like resource mobilization, of course. It will discuss ways and means to achieve the ambitious goal of the framework, which is to invest $200 billion annually in biodiversity, and also to reform up to $500 billion in governmental subsidies that are currently detrimental to biodiversity. This is the biggest challenge. Of course, the COP will remind itself and everyone that the efforts that are underway are good but not sufficient. Additional pledges and commitments are needed, but also beyond the pledges, the money has to be doing what it's supposed to do and help and support implementation on the ground at all levels of governments and in society. The COP will also discuss the review of the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. So being the first COP after the adoption of the framework, the COP will see how many national plans have been adapted and aligned with the framework. There should be around 35 updated NBSAPs ready at the COP, but it's yet to be confirmed, as numbers will probably grow in the next 3 weeks. Again, the review process could do better. The review process is also an opportunity for all levels of governments and all actors of society to engage, either in the development of the framework, but also by having other types of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, such as the local ones. So LBSAPs are welcome and in their alignment with the NBSAP and of course with the framework. And a lot of things can be supported in this process by subnational and local authorities, considering that they are directly involved in planning, urban planning and rural urban linkages. They're involved in data collection, of course. They can support monitoring, reporting, etc., etc. Talking of which, the COP will review the status of the mechanisms for planning, monitoring, and reporting and review, and they will present and discuss the indicators and the binary indicators that have been developed in the last couple of years. Among them, of course, under Target 12, which is the target that speaks the most about connectivity, corridors, urban blue and green corridors and areas in their context of in the context of enhancing. I'm sorry, I don't have it before me. The quality and the access and connectivity of those areas by mainstreaming conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity. So Target 12, which is the one that is the most obviously relevant to subnational and local authorities, will have new indicators. And I invite you to have a look at them. It's in the compilation of the draft decision and draft recommendations of the for the COP. Other topics of importance, of course, the development of a new program of work on Article 8J, which is about traditional knowledge and Indigenous people in local communities. So these sessions will address the rights of Indigenous people in local communities. We'll discuss gender, traditional knowledge, access to justice, and environmental right defenders, and so much more, because the program of work is all encompassing and very aligned with the framework as well. So it will be up for adoption. And of course, I will also flag the item 13 on cooperation, which is the one that I follow closely, in which there is a report from UN Habitat on the implementation of the resolution on biodiversity. So that will be available, and UN Habitat with its resolution on biodiversity was very applauded by our teams. It came along with another 25 organizations, global organizations, conventions, bodies that have recognized the importance of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in their decisions or resolutions between January 2023 and August 2024. So it's a lot. It's really good for mainstreaming of biodiversity and integration of biodiversity across sectors, across the UN system. So it's very, very exciting. UN Habitat, global networks, organizations working with subnational and local authorities are also encouraged to participate in the negotiation, are of course, encouraged to participate in the negotiations that can be done either as an individual observer or together with other related organizations in the what we call the major stakeholder group. I'm sorry, I'm having coffee. The major stakeholder group, which is mainly led and coordinated by ICLE and also Regions 4 for subnational authorities. So together they coordinate all inputs coming from subnational and local authorities, and they create they develop a joint statement to be presented at meetings and plenaries. But otherwise, everyone is invited as an organization to take the mic and speak and provide and share their views. Obviously, there will be a lot of activities around subnational and local authorities at the margins of the negotiations. There will be mainly, of course, the 8th summit for subnational governments and cities on October 26th. It's co-hosted, of course, by ICLE and the CBD secretariats and other partners. This year, the summit will focus on themes that are very close to the heart of the host government also, which include peace with nature, of course, partnerships, progress, and the discussions will be leading to an outcome that will be presented to the COP16 high-level segment, where, of course, partners will emphasize the role of yes?
You can conclude.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, and that's okay. Thank you. So yes, the message will be passed to the high-level segment. There will be way more activities, side events that were for everyone to join, but also the events that are not related to subnational governments, which are on nature, culture, business, finance, youth, women's policy, research, etc. So the tools on rural landscapes, the concepts of interdependence, etc., are very relevant also in the context of the other thematic, other important theme of the COP, which is the triple COPs, as was already mentioned. So the involvement of subnational governments should also look into that direction, where the planetary crisis will be talked about more and more and more. And I think with the urban-rural linkages and related concepts, you are already bringing the three conventions together and breaking silos. And so the title, Biodiversity Beyond Borders, to me is very, very pertinent. Okay, I just want to conclude by saying that a lot has been done. There are many references to subnational governments in the decisions of the CBD, but there's more to do to engage local and other local authorities in NBSAPs and to increase the integration of biodiversity in urban planning, to continue to raise awareness of citizens about biodiversity, but also to share the policies and tools that you have and the guidance that you have and the publications that you have. There's much more that could be done together. So we hope that with its experience, UN Habitat will continue to play an important role under the CBD and to integrate biodiversity on the ground, and to come also and integrate biodiversity together with others at the global level. and the CBD Secretariat will do the same, and we will continue to engage with you. And in fact, in the lead to COP17, there will be an exercise to review the role of subnational and local authorities in the implementation of the framework and of the convention. So thank you very much. Let's work together and continue to promote this concept of whole of society and whole of government, including in the context of your work on urban biodiversity linkages. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from you all and to learn. Thank you very much. Sorry about going over time.
No, it's okay. Thank you for the very detailed information. Indeed, it's music to ears of some of our colleagues who are actually preparing our contribution, or UN Habitat contribution to COP16. And I believe Christina will be sharing about what UN Habitat is doing towards peace over in this journey. And we take note of the invitation to contribute in the different dialogues and in the different ways that you have highlighted, including indicator 12, indicator target 12 on the draft, and we could see this in the website on the draft decision and recommendations. Thank you so much. I believe all this information can be found in the website of CBD, specifically for COP16, and colleagues could be able to check. So
I can share a few links in the chat. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So next, I see Mr. Carlos joined us. Mr. Carlos, it's your time. So Mr. Carlos is a former mayor of the city of Monteria, Colombia. And this is where, again, COP16 will be taking place in Cali, Colombia. That's where COP16 will be taking place. But he was a former mayor in Monteria. And this is where we had our first expert group meeting, especially after the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, our first expert group meeting on urban-rural linkages. And this is where the guiding principles of urban-rural linkages were conceived. He's also a former Minister of Environment for Colombia, and he is also helping currently UNCCD with organizing forum for the COP16 in Riyadh, the UNCCD COP16. Which will be in December. And thank you so much, Mr. Carlos. I know, again, it's early for you, and sorry for the confusion of the time, and thank you for creating time to join us for this session. Over to you. You have 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Grace, very much. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I know you are all over the world. I'm sorry I had 9 East, but well, I'm here. Thank you very much. As you say, Grace, thank you for your introduction. My name is Carlos Correa. I'm currently Senior Fellow at Conservation International too. As you said, former Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development from Colombia, today from Santa Marta. Hello, everyone. I invite you to come after COP to Santa Marta. To spend some time with the indigenous communities and see the sea. It's amazing, really. Well, I've been talking to Thomas and some of you, and I would like to highlight some things about my time during my ministry. I helped solidify Colombia's role as global leader in biodiversity conservation, laying the groundwork for a carbon neutral and nature positive future. In December 2021, Colombia passed the historic climate action law, which made significant progress in stopping deforestation and tackle illegal fishing and wildlife trade. And during that time, our administration banned shark fishing. And I'm telling this because I'm now in Santa Marta, and I was just remembering about all these things that we did at that time. We also approved the National Protected Areas Policy and declared 37% of marine areas and 31% of terrestrial areas as protected, reaching the global goal of 30% protection 8 years ahead of schedule. And I think, Grace and colleagues, that this will be an issue at COP16, definitely. The 30 by 30. And our campaign at that time was the 30 before 30, because we need to accelerate action. So it will be our campaign always. We can do it before, we can go ahead. And of course, my time as a minister was also marked by challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, a period of immense difficulty for our country and its people. We worked hard to address interconnected crises and launch at that time the Bosque La Esperanza. It was like the Forest of the Hope. It was an ecological restoration project to honor the victims of the pandemic as part of a larger plan that we had to plant 180 million trees across the country and restore 300,000 hectares all over the country, especially in the Amazon area. And in a country that has suffered greatly from internal conflict, I also worked to build bridges. You were just talking about that. Now, build bridges with communities and environmental defenders committed to a sustainable future. I think that is essential to create safe havens for those who protect this beautiful country. And I'm sure this will be a key topic at COP16 too, under the theme Peace with Nature. So we're talking about urban and rural linkages. We need to have peace with nature and with the linkages. As a former minister and as a former mayor of my hometown, Monteria, it's a city on the Colombia's Caribbean coast with nearly 500,000 residents. I've come to realize that cities are central to meeting the global biodiversity framework targets and creating the conditions to prevent land degradation and build resilience to climate change. Now we have seen Colombian cities emerge as global leaders, showing how nature-positive cities can truly transform the planet. As a member of the World Economic Forum expert group on nature-positive cities, I believe that cities can be the driving force to reverse biodiversity loss and put us on a more sustainable path globally. In 2012, we created Monteria 2032. It was a 20-year development plan to reconnect the city with the river and its people. A key part of this plan was the understanding that revitalizing the Sinú River would be essential for reclaiming public space, water management, basic sanitation, and tourism. So Monteria has made significant progress in putting nature at the heart of its policies, laying the foundation for a remarkable transformation. Another examples, city of Medellin also made headlines with the Green Corridors program launched in 2016 through a network of over 30 green corridors in the city. This initiative connects vertical gardens, streams, parks, and surrounding hills, which has helped reduce ambient temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius in part of the city. Some other example is Barranquilla, that was the first city named to join the Biodiversity by 2030. I don't know if you have heard about this, Grace. I think that some of the colleagues have worked with this initiative. This concept was built and launched in 2021 with the support of the World Economic Forum, whose objective is to create a future where the built environment, social structure, and natural capital coexist in harmony. So today, projects such as Magdalena Riverwalk and the Mallorquín Swamp are an example of good practices. Definitely, local and subnational governments are playing a growing role, and their presence will be a defining feature of the Rio Convention's upcoming COPs. In Cali, we can learn from cities like Monteria, Medellin, and other cities in the world about how urban areas can drive the transformation towards a nature-positive world. In Baku, lessons from local governments will be crucial for achieving the goal of the Paris Agreement and transitioning to a low-carbon economy. In Riyadh, we need to showcase cities affected by desertification and potential renaturalization strategies. So with these global trends showing that nearly 70% of the world population will be living in cities by 2050, cities will be essential drivers of transformation. This growing importance highlights the critical role of UN Habitat as the leading agency for human settlements. As we work together to tackle biodiversity loss, move away from fossil fuels, and build resilient communities. We are seeking to fundamentally transform the way we live. UN Habitat will be definitely key to driving this change. Finally, the UNCCD CoP taking place from December 2nd to 13th in 2024 in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. This landmark event will bring together global leaders to accelerate action on land restoration, drought resilience, and green transition with focus on Saudi Arabia and beyond. A key highlight will be Governance Day, held on December 6th, where we will explore the importance of responsible land governance in promoting human rights, combating land degradation, and fostering inclusive development. We will focus on themes such as land tenure, integrated land use planning, and urban-rural linkages as essential for sustainable land management and poverty reduction. Finally, additionally, the Major Forum will foster dialogue among local governments, building partnerships to enhance urban-rural connections and scale up restoration activities. It will emphasize high-impact coalitions driven by local and regional governments promoting transformative, future-oriented collaborations. So we are looking in this space alongside leading organizations like UN Habitat, ICLEI, CAF, UNCCD, UCLG, and others. I think, colleagues, that it's time for cities to lead the way. And we have to highlight this because cities and subnational governments are taking more relevant place in these COPs. So we will be there. I hope to see you in Cali very soon. I will be there for 2 weeks. So we will have time to talk about this. Thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you so much, Minister Carlos, and really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing with us the very tremendous achievements that you achieved during your tenure. And of course, it presents some very interesting case studies that would be of interest for us as UN Habitat and the impact that these have made. And we take note of your emphasis concerning our peace with nature and landscapes, as well as the peace between the built environment and the natural environment. We also take your emphasis on the role of national and as well as local authorities or governments, and how you've emphasized that urban areas are drivers, but they must also ensure that rural areas or rural landscapes are not left behind. And thank you for sharing with us the intersection of the 3 COPs and inviting us or giving us more information about the UNCCD COP and what will be taking place. I understand UN Habitat is co-leading the Governance Day, and indeed, thank you so much, Mr. Carlos. So now we're going to proceed to our next dynamic panel, which again will be sharing with us insights from different perspectives, and we'll start with UN Habitat again. We'll proceed to Arusha. We'll then proceed to Berlin City and then land in Latin America before proceeding to this to discussions. So we'll start with UN Habitat work on biodiversity, and we'll be having Mr. Andrew Rudd. He is an urban environment officer, and he has done this and related work for some time. He will be sharing with us about UN Habitat plans for COP16, but he'll also mention or share with us about the publication that that UN Habitat has produced on cities and nature, planning for the future, and any other work that we have been able to achieve on the resolution and plans moving forward. You have 7 minutes, Andrew, and we are really excited to have collaborated with your team in organizing this session. Over to you, Andrew.
Grace, thanks so much. I'm afraid I've come back from a mission with a nasty cold, so you'll have to put up with my bad voice and lack of charisma. But I'm supported by my
it's clear.
Much more charismatic colleague Tina, who will stay for Q&A, etc. Okay, jumping right in. Is this visible? Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'll give a bit of a conceptual framing on Habitat's work in the area and updates on our new mandate. I'm going to jump right in. I think it's worth saying biodiversity, despite its often popular conception as about iconic and charismatic species and their threatenedness, is really it's a massive spectrum. So I'm going to look at this along 3 scales. So this is scales of organization. Stems all the way from genes through species, ecosystems, and indeed the biosphere. At Habitat, we tend to focus on landscapes, the ecological scale of things. There is indeed, as the minister previously said, many things that cities can do at the scale of the landscape, the watershed, etc., to promote biodiversity. A study Habitat did a couple of years ago looked at all the hidden co-benefits that urban parks, green space strategies, etc., were delivering, and what we found is that those cities often will develop green spaces for recreation, and flood storage. There is so much more delivered for free. Benefits like pollination, carbon storage, nutrient recycling, services critical for combating food insecurity, the climate crisis, etc. If cities just knew more, mayors would have a lot more incentive to invest in future. Another study we did along with Nature Conservancy showed, again, a lot of benefits. You can see upper center, increasing vegetation brings reduction in depression and other mental health benefits at the same time. And you can see bottom center here, as cities densify, it becomes much more difficult to maintain and increase tree canopy. A lot of trade-offs involved here. I'm going to move to the second lens of looking at this, and this is scales of space. So if Habitat's primarily working organizationally at the scale of the ecosystem, it's very helpful to look to our friends in urban forestry who have conceived of these scales of impact that our work at the ecosystem scale can deliver. And that's at the local, the near, and the far. And I'll go through each of those very quickly. I think this is a good framing of what we are complementarily doing within Habitat. Scale of the local, making sure that dense, impervious spaces within cities have adequate green space and all the benefits. Giving one example here, this is by no means exhaustive. Planning, Finance, and Economy section, particularly in Habitat, particularly the public space program, has a wonderful tool, the citywide public space assessment. Capacitates students to go out, geolocate all the open spaces in a city and qualitatively assess ownership, occupancy, perceptions, and now a new biodiversity layer. A lot of that work tends to be through park revitalization and creation, including in our host city Habitat. Our climate team is also doing a lot of work, tools on nature-based solutions for delivering climate resilience in specific informal areas, again, a site-based approach. If we zoom then to the far scale, we have, of course, the work of your very own policy, legislation, and governance section, urban-rural linkages. This is a paper your team produced for the last CoP, looking at some of those telecouplings. A complementary paper that program development branch produced also looked at the various scales of influence that cities have beyond their boundaries. And this is, again, no better to talk about it than you, Grace, and the rest of your colleagues, but just want to contextualize this. Your work looking at telecoupling and the impact of flows of materials across administrative boundaries has been extremely helpful for complementing that. That leaves us then with the middle spatial scale, and that's the near. And this is a big, largely unaddressed gap in work, cities, and biodiversity. This is the edge of cities. This is the peri-urban condition where a lot of expansion is happening. Again, another study we've done in recent years shows habitat loss due to urban expansion as the top driver of biodiversity loss. Some years ago, we were expecting a doubling in the size of cities, much faster than population. That has not decelerated. A study by UPenn, a partner of ours, shows indeed 90% of cities expanding in direct conflict with biodiversity hotspots. Here's why. Essentially, we're ending up with sprawl and segregation, a lot of 20th century highly inefficient patterns now being reproduced at 10 times the scale in the developing world for growing middle classes. Fortunately, UN is trying to get to grips with this. We have something called the Common Approach, to biodiversity, which has ambitions to improve quality of urbanization, limit encroachment in others. We have these with colleagues of ours. There's, of course, the Singapore Index on Cities Biodiversity. This has been around for more than 10 years, really helping cities get to grips first with a baseline and then monitoring change over time that includes complicated aspects like landscape fragmentation, as well as more governance-based aspects like education, degree of protection. There still remains a gap, and I'm moving to the third and final scale. This is scales of time. Something else we noticed in a study, if we're looking, a lot of attention tends to be on retrofitting and restoration. So fixing a degraded and often destroyed natural environment after the fact. Very little attention on preserving, on proactive actions that can be taken to avoid that kind of loss, particularly at the city scale. Here's another study by the University of Pennsylvania, anticipating, in this case, Sao Paulo, what that will look like at the peri-urban edge where most of this uncontrolled degradation and destruction is happening. Fortunately, in the nick of time, Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework came through with two really groundbreaking targets. Again, not exhaustive, but number 1 on spatial planning in general, number 12 on green and blue spaces in city, not just quantity, but quality, connectivity, and access. And we're very pleased that just last June, our own, I was about to say Governing Council Assembly of UN Habitat has given us the UN's first resolution on biodiverse cities. I think the minister mentioned this was co-championed by both Colombia and Costa Rica, we're very pleased to say, and it mandates us to create novel toolkits to assist governments and to find funding for projects. So we're really focused on connecting both these different scales of space and of time while we continue to invest in the creation and restoration of spaces within existing cities. We're really trying also now, core with biodiversity, to fill that gap around conservation and preservation, particularly at the peri-urban edge where there are very few controls, very little planning happening. So something we've got here sort of at the cutting edge, and this is the centerpiece for the implementation of our resolution, is a hotspot stoplight. And what it does is to project land use change, biodiversity loss, and certain effects of climate to 2050. This is based on open source data, but it uses AI and it uses machine learning to project and to overlay all of these at a scale of 30 meters. This is the metropolitan area of San Jose in Costa Rica. And what it comes up with is a stoplight, which then says to a city in red, these are areas of very high risk, mostly peri-urban. intact biodiversity, very high chances of land use expansion. Caution, stop, preserve, do not develop here. But we know cities at the same time cannot afford to forfeit investment. So we're providing also the yellow and the green lights, which say with caution. And in the green cases, here are alternative areas that can be developed with minimal risk to both planet and people. I'm going to stop there. I think I've reached my 7 minutes. I hope that's been helpful. Grace, thank you. And apologies from the director of our program development branch, Philippe de Court. He was not able to frame this, but it's been a pleasure co-organizing with you. Looking forward to seeing you all in Cali.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you for the very detailed information about what Inhabitat is doing. And it's quite surprising to see that 90% of cities expansion is in conflict with biodiversity, something to take note of all of us working in this particular topic. So if okay, Andrew, you could share the presentation for those who would like to follow closely, and we take note of the tools and materials that Inhabitat has prepared. Time is not on our side. And for the next three panelists, I think we'll be very brief so that we can get some time for discussion. So do note some very interesting comments in the chat by colleagues. And also, in case you have any question, please post it there. And at this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Leonard Mpanju, who is an urban planner under the Ministry of Lands and Housing and Human Settlements in Tanzania. We'd like to hear about what Arusha is doing as regards greening the city and probably some lessons that we could learn. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Leonard, and over to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You're muted. You're muted. Please unmute yourself. You're still muted. Please unmute yourself. Mark, if you can assist. You're still muted. Can you check down there? You'll see. To save the 1 minute, I think we can proceed with Sandra as Mr. Leonard. Can you check down there? You'll see microphone, then you'll unmute. But in the meantime, I think we can proceed to Berlin, where we'll be having Sandra sharing with us interesting insights from Berlin. Sandra is a focal point in the mayor's office for the for Berlin city and specifically Berlin's Urban Nature Pact. So thank you so much for joining us and looking forward to hearing about this very interesting initiative. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you. Hi, Grace.
You have 5 minutes.
5? Oh, I got 7. Okay, I have to see. I'll do my best. So thanks for inviting me. So I'm the Chief Biodiversity Officer of the City of Berlin, but have been worked like a long time in policy think tanks, research, and other areas before I joined the city. But yeah, just to tell you about like what's the Berlin Urban Nature Pact is about. So I think Carlos already put it very nicely, because this is really coming from the idea that cities have a lot of power, even more than national governments, to drive transformation and to make an impact and to preserve biodiversity. So this Berlin Urban Nature Pact, it's a pioneering global initiative that places cities really at the forefront of biodiversity protection and restoring urban nature. And what is also a bit unique about the pact, it has been not developed by a government or not by national government and not top down. It's really, the pact has been developed by cities, for cities around, we had around like 19 cities from all over, all the continents, from all over the world that have been involved. We were supported by ICLEI in the process. And the idea is really to take like the targets, these global targets we hear about all the time. We also discussed about those in Cali, but to implement those with real actions at local level. This is the thing. And there was 2 years developing the pact under the initiative of Berlin, because, just to keep it short, but our head of nature conservation at the time, he signed the Edinburgh Declaration and then later the Montreal Pledge. And he was wondering, okay, what do we do now with all the pledges and all with the signatures? And this is where I thought, oh, it might be a good idea to think something more practical. And the result of this, after 2 years, that there is a 7-page document with 28 smart targets across 7 different target areas like food and agriculture, blue infrastructure, but of course also environment and nature education, and really covering the targets that the cities want to follow up, but also always reflecting to the global level, to the global targets. And it was a long negotiation process because you can, of course, you probably know every city has other issues. Some issues we have in common, but we had to come to, of course, also to a joint pact so that everybody serves. So some targets might be not relevant for one city and some for others. So it really depends which region you're from. And you have to, if cities want to commit to the pact and implement these targets, they have to pick at least 15 out of the 28 targets. Berlin as a leader, like, it was not easy, but we tried to pick 17. But I can tell you, it was not an easy process to really, with all the resource, to come in a conclusion and joint agreement, because they all have different interests, but we achieved to have the 17 targets. The pact was finally officially adopted by the mayor on 3rd of September. And we're really keen now to launch the pact at the 8th City Summit, which ICLEI is organizing. And we also will have sessions with some cities already together to see, like, what do they need to implement the pact? Because we know it's not implementing itself. I think Chantal already said it, you need finances. That's pretty sure. So we also have to see, like, finding creative ways. As we know, public finance is pretty reduced and it's getting less and less, at least in Berlin, that's the case. But the idea is really, like, there's like 2 big things to the pact. The one is we want to commit to ambitious targets, and also for Berlin, it's not all the targets we have already achieved. Like, we are pretty good in environmental education, but there's so many other targets where we have to do a lot to achieve them. So this is one part of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that we want to learn from each other. You know, you learn best from other examples. So this is really to have this capacity building between the cities. Maybe have some city leading on one specific target, which can be helpful for other cities who want to reach the target. But of course, we also need this capacity building within our local governments because not everybody knows, like, nature and biodiversity is like it's a mainstreaming theme. It's not just good for the nature itself. It's good for health, it's for well-being, for climate adaptation, for everything. But still in Berlin, not everybody knows and has the same understanding. So just saying, likewise, this is very important. And also, as the first video showed, as in Berlin, for example, like, we have almost 4 million people, but at the same time, Berlin is also home to 20,000 different plant and animal species. And some of them are in good status and some others are just not in a good state. So this is something we really want to push forward, and we want really to take the cities who have really the ability to make a change and really to implement measures at a local level. So to motivate them to join the pact. I think this is what we would like to do when we now when we have to launch at a city summit in Cali. But in addition, we also have a coordination office, which was a tender procedure, and ICLEI together with IUCN, they will support us with the coordination office over the next time, because we also know implementing such a pact is not going itself. It needs a lot of effort. You need to do a lot of, we need a good capacity building program. We need to see how we can support the cities, how we can give them also advice on bringing in the finance they need. So we also, like, it's also a new area, new ground for us. I have to say, usually we only join the activities like C40 and Eurocities and other city networks like ICLEI, but we never did a pact ourselves. And Berlin is in the name because, just as I said, because it was initiated by Berlin, but it's a pact we hope for everybody. And in addition, of course, to the targets, also things we already heard about from Chantal that will be part of the CBD is, it's of course, we also have certain principles we want to apply with. It's like co-creation, of course. We also want to take inclusive approaches. And so there's many.
Sandra?
Yes, I'm almost there. So I only want to say, I will also put into chat, I put the link to the pact so you can find out more. And if you're interested, please feel free and reach out to me, but we will be there at the 26th of October. And thanks for giving me the time.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and really interesting pact. I believe colleagues will be able to open and access it via the link, noting that it will be launched soon. And cities or government representatives present take note that indeed that they need to pick 15 out of the 28 targets for them to be able to be part of the pact. Thank you so much, Sandra. And we also take note on the financing need and the capacity development needed for the cities. So I'll proceed to our next speaker. Mark, you can alert me when Mr. Leonard is back. But then in the meantime, oh, you're back. Okay. Take us to Arusha. You have 5 minutes. Tell us about what you're doing on bringing Arusha.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. Let me share some experiences from Arusha, East Africa. My name is Leonard Impanju. I'm the Principal Urban Planner from the Ministry of Lands in the government of Tanzania. Thank you to share a little about urbanization, urban forestry projects in Arusha. We know we can agree together that our cities, especially in East Africa, the value of the city depends on nature. And differently from other cities like Dubai, where the human design can attract and make big tourists, but in our East Africa and Africa in general, we depend on nature. So in Arusha, of course, we have emphasized on putting the city, the urban areas in a natural way that can accommodate a biodiversity situation. And then we have emphasized and engaged some key implementers on urban forest, and we have 12 almost 12 urban forests within urban areas where biodiversity is being captured into a very good supportive way. And this makes the land of the urban areas to be more valuable. And that's why if you come to Arusha, the value of the land, once you need the land in Arusha, if you have emphasized into conservation, then that land will be valuable than a land with a property, a building sometimes. Now, what can we say, or what can I share as a lesson from Arusha, East Africa? We emphasize mostly in community involvement. That's why we find that we have ownership, sense of ownership with our projects. And now the city, the urban areas remains in a state of ecosystem. And then we emphasize on biodiversity enhancement, where initiatives are introduced to tree species that help restore local biodiversity in Arusha. And we emphasize on planting trees, that is indigenous trees. That's why you find that now the most of the urban areas and can link with village areas, but the visual link and ecosystem looks the same in terms of nature. We have emphasized also on economic benefits, where our local citizens around the urban areas, we emphasize on urban agriculture and estates that can create a diversity, that can create most of the area very green, very biodiversity, and can attract tourists, most of them.
Mr. Mpanju, you can conclude. You can conclude.
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
you can conclude. Yes.
I'm just yes, I'm trying to share now to the law. You have asked me about the law of Arusha in the context of biodiversity. Arusha in East Africa is a biodiversity corridor where you find that species can migrate between protected areas, and the connectivity is essential for genetic diversity of wildlife, such as the elephant. And we have parks, we have a connectivity of Arusha National Park, Serengeti National Park, even Amboseli National Park in Kenya. There is a connectivity. That's why Arusha comes to be a very potential in terms of conserving urban forest. Now, to put more emphasis on what we are doing there. We have research and education hub where we emphasize on conservation, and this facilitates research on local ecosystem and provide a platform for educating future readers in biodiversity conservation. We put on emphasis on that, and then we have emphasized on urban diversity initiatives through engaging, through participating with private sectors. And then we have done what can be said that to be a tourism sports center. The nature and the value of the tourism we are making is based on the nature, which we put efforts on that. Now,
okay, you have 30 seconds, Mr. Mpanju. You have 30 seconds to conclude. Yes.
What we can share as a lesson or from other government, it's just common methods that we use. We always use community engagement and education, but partnership with local organizations. We have some local organizations that supports us, and that's why Arusha now, you can see there is a very big initiatives. Once you get a chance to land on Arusha in East Africa. We have also emphasized on a policy flavor. We have developed policies that provide incentives for business and the homeowners to plant trees. And we have tax breaks and the grants, of course. We have done that. That's what we have. I can share in short. But
Thank you so much.
To make local people to engage by giving them half-mile area to participate in the activities on urban area forest. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much, everyone. And sorry for really rushing you. The time is really not on our side, but thank you for very interesting stories from Arusha, even seeing the economic benefits of biodiversity, including adding value to land. Thank you so much. I believe your presentation will be able to post it in the chat. We'll have a poll shared right now. It will just appear in your screen. Please fill the poll, and then I will hand over to Thomas to take over from here with the next panelist and then with the discussion. Thomas, over to you.
Yes, thank you, and hello everyone. Yes, thank you, and please do post all your documents or anything that you would like to in the chat, and we'll collect that. But let me now introduce Santiago Granados, who is working with the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in the Bogota office of ECLAC. And he will present us with some of the work going on the road to Cali in his office. And those of you may remember, we worked with the stock taking of territorial approaches a few years ago that also dealt with the biodiversity territorial intersection. And this is where we met our colleagues in Bogota. So please, Santiago, let me turn it over to you. And if you can keep your remarks quite short, we still have a few more after you. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Very quickly, Carlos Correa already extended you an invitation to enjoy Colombia beyond what you will experience during COP16, and I would personally like to reinforce that invitation. Okay, so I also would like to mention that I'm not an English native speaker, so I prepared the script to help me go through this intervention, hopefully very short. To begin with, I would like to mention that as a result of our work in the region and the needs we have identified working with our member countries, our organization has developed 5 main messages that we want to bring to the table and that you will see being brought out in the COP. And I just posted them in the chat to make this shorter. In the regards of these messages, I would start mentioning it is no secret to anyone familiar to Latin America and the Caribbean that this is a wealthy region in natural and biological resources, yet it is trapped in development models that overexploit and misuse such resources. To give you some facts, the region is home of nearly 50% of the planet's biological diversity, 1/5 of the world's natural forest, and 1/3 of the world's freshwater reserves, despite having only 16 of the Earth's land surface. However, in the last 3 decades, the region has lost 150 million hectares of natural forest, and if the annual rate of deforestation of the last decade continues, by 2025, it is estimated that an additional 77 million hectares of forest will have been lost. All this together with the contamination of water sources and soil, the entry of invasive species and overexploitation of animal species for commercial purposes has, among other reasons, have caused the region to currently host 10 of the 36 critical areas of high biodiversity and endemic species, which also present a high degree of threat. Also, the region shows a drop 3 times greater than North America in the Life Plant Index, estimated in minus 494, an index which measures the abundance of vertebrate populations. The situation becomes a challenge for the region because biodiversity is not only vital for ecological balance, but it's also key to the region's economic and social development. Biological wealth contributes to providing environmental goods and services essential for life, sustaining income, and promoting economic activity to the point that is estimated that more than half of the region's GDP depends either moderate with a 38% or severely with a 17% on nature and services and the services it provides. Taking into account the relevance of nature resources exploitation for production in the countries of the region. In spite of this reality, evidence suggests that the main economic processes that generate biodiversity loss are closely related to agriculture, particularly deforestation and land use change associated with this activity, which represents a paradox, actually, considering the weight of this sector in the economies and employment generation of most of the countries in the region, as well as the dependence of this activity on natural services. In this regard, in ICLAC, we believe that sustainability is not only viable, but essential to ensure economic growth that does not compromise the region's natural capital or aggravates the climate crisis. We recognize that, yes?
Can you wrap up in about 30 seconds or a minute?
Okay. Very quickly to mention, one of the main ideas we want to put on the table is the importance of mobilizing resources to achieve these purposes by different strategies. One of them, in line with Target 19 of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, has to do with structuring appropriate financial vehicles for diverse maturities, such as certain schemes of blended finance that have started to be developed in the region. But we also think that another main action we have to take is to reorientate resources, especially for countries such as the countries in the region with little fiscal space, public resources that today have a negative impact on biodiversity being redirected to activities that have a positive impact. Also, beyond taxonomies and such instruments that have been developed in Colombia, Costa Rica, or Mexico, we think that the financial system needs a restructuration that allows it to evaluate differently the risk associated with this type of inversions.
Santiago, thank you.
Yes. And okay, should I end right now?
Yeah, I think, yeah, wrap it up. We have only a few minutes left, so, but I think your points made very clear, and thank you for bringing up the finance issue, which hasn't been brought up before. And this is actually extremely important, as we all know, and there is a lot of consensus across the networks of cities to push for local loss and damage adaptation resources from the UNFCCC COP process that comes into the other two COPs, and this is where the convergence that was talked about earlier by Carlos Correa comes in. But thank you so much. If you want to leave us with additional points, I'm sorry to cut you off. Please do so in the chat, and I thank you for that. And we look forward to working together closely. We have run out of time for what we hoped for was a good discussion. So in lieu of that, I would like to invite our colleague Camilo Romero, who was the primary author of a document called Managing Urban-Rural Linkages for Biodiversity, which was part of the formal document library for COP15 and a contributor to the work on negotiations for Target 12 that you've heard about, along with other documents, including the Cities and Nature Future of Urban Planning, which Andrew's team worked on. So let me turn to Camilo for just a very, very quick 1 or 2 minutes, Camilo, and then we'll proceed to Ingrid and closing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Thomas, and hi, everyone. I'm Camilo Romero. I'm independent consultant working currently for the Natural Resources Governance Institute. And yes, I am the co-author of Managing Urban-Rural Linkages for Biodiversity with Thomas, a paper supported by UN Habitat, a policy brief supported by UN Habitat and the Convention and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD. So what I would like to share are 3 points. So the first one is what urban-rural linkages can bring to the conversations, to the discussions on biodiversity. So the first one is that drivers of biodiversity loss, such as changes in land uses, deforestation, extraction of resources, mining, extensive livestock farming, and monocultures, are connected with urbanization process, and particularly with urban demands for resources. So here I'm going to share 2 facts. First, like 70% of all natural resources are consumed in cities. The second one is that by 2050, it is estimated that 80% of all food will be consumed in cities. So that is why biodiversity conservation and restoration need an integrated urban-rural policy. So the second point is, if we see this on a global scale, so we are witnessing extraction and transfer of natural resources from rural areas in low and middle-income countries to urban areas in high-income countries in the north. High-income countries have developed as net importers of natural resources, while low-income and middle-income countries have become net exporters of natural resources. So if you add to this fact that most of the consumption happening in cities in the global north and biodiversity loss hotspots are located in Latin America, in Africa, and in rural areas in Asia Pacific in the global south. So This is to highlight that an essential part of the discussion on biodiversity, when we see it through the lens of urban-rural linkages, is to talk about the linkages between rural areas in the global south and urban areas in the global north. So to conclude, Thomas, so we evidence that with Thomas, with this paper that we developed, managing urban-rural linkages for biodiversity. So, and we propose like a two-folded approach. So the first one is conceiving territories as an area that is continuous and is made of adjacent urban and rural areas, and that can be managed by policies that encompass these contiguous urban and rural areas. So here are we talking about regions, bioregions, basins, metropolitan areas. And the second approach is understanding territories as a network. So in this case, like interactions between an urban rural areas extend across regions and countries. So policies should target the flow of resources or the supply chain on commodity supply chains. So that's why, that's why it's just very important to bring urban rural linkages to global biodiversity policy forums, because this needs coordination between countries, but particularly subnational governments in different countries to manage these long distance linkages, driving also biodiversity loss, but also for protecting and restoring biodiversity. Thanks so much.
Camilo, thank you so much for bringing that up, because that was something that really developed in our work for COP15 and further developed in our work for COP16 and UNCCD, where I want to just announce that a primer on urban-rural linkages and land will take that kind of bifocal approach, territorial and flows-based urban-rural linkages, even further with practical tools that some of you on this call are very familiar with. So we are now at the point where we're wrapping up, and we'd like to turn to Ingrid Kotze from ICLEI Africa, if you're on the call, to help us just wrap up with a few key messages that you've heard during this very rich conversation, which could have easily been 3 or 4 hours and not just 1.5 hours. So are you here, Ingrid? Is Ingrid on the call? I'm not sure Ingrid is here. Can someone check and see if she's on the call? I can't really tell. In the meantime, I think that we'd like to share a quick Mentimeter survey with all of you, and our team will post that right now in the chat. Can you do that?
Yes, it's done, Thomas. Unless anyone has a burning question that as we finalize, we have 3 minutes.
So Grace, is Ingrid on the call or not?
I can't see her, but I see a hand. Someone has raised her hand.
Oh, let's take that. Let's see. Who is that? Please speak if you'd like. We have just a couple minutes left, and then we'll conclude.
Okay, this is Boberi, who recently joined the UN Habitat Headquarters Knowledge and Innovation Branch. However, I work for World Food Program, Kenya Country Office. So there we were talking about a lot of urban-rural linkages. However, the organization itself, the World Food Program, was lacking the expertise of urban. So I was wondering if you have any collaboration and partnership with the UN agencies such as UN World Food Program to just fill up the gap of the capacity of our sister agencies. Over to you.
Sure. And thank you for that. Thank you for that. And let's follow up with you offline, because there is a building relationship around these issues, urban-rural linkages, urbanization, and the work of the World Food Program in a number of areas. The discussions have been at headquarter to headquarter level. So it would be very interesting to actually have more bridge building at the UN offices in Nairobi. So let's do that. Follow up. We're now at the end, unless there's another hand, and I have to defer to my colleagues because I don't see the whole range of everybody, but we are at time now. And I think that this has been, as I said before, very rich conversation, and it is unfortunate that we don't have more time, but I think everyone here has probably gleaned that this is just an ongoing conversation which leads to hopefully a lot more action where cities and what was called a whole of government, whole of society approach is taken. And it's very exciting that Colombia, with all of its leadership and its ground level work in biodiversity conservation, is the site of the next COP. I think for me, what stands out are a couple of comments that have been made. That the built environment is where social and natural capital coexist is actually a very powerful meme, and also that 90% of city expansion happens to be in conflict with biodiversity. So those are two statements in tension with each other, where urban-rural linkages can actually provide approaches, tools, and policies and programs that actually take us to where we need to be in bringing culture and nature together. So let me thank everybody for being here for the last hour and a half. There are many things that are going on the way to Cali, and I know some of you are involved directly in them. Please keep us in touch and let us talk after Cali and catch up with what goes on there. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you, everyone. We will be updating you on the next COP. But in the meantime, thank you. We have a Menti link there. Please, it's just to give feedback to improve future COPs. And indeed, it's just the beginning of this conversation. We keep inviting you to future conversation on this very topic. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, nice evening, nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.